Stand at the edge of the Colosseum at sunset, and you'll notice something strange. One entire side is just gone, not damaged, not crumbling. Gone. Nearly half of the world's most iconic monument has vanished into thin air. And if you think it was just time and weather that did this, you're about to discover something far more shocking. Because somewhere in Rome right now, you're walking on it, praying in it, admiring it in museums. The Colosseum didn't fall, it was stolen, piece by piece, stone by stone, and the thieves? They weren't barbarians or invaders, they were the Romans themselves. When you first see photographs of the Colosseum, something feels off. The northern wall stands relatively intact, weathered, but recognizable. But then you turn to the south, and it looks like a giant took a bite out of history. Most visitors assume it's just age, 2,000 years of earthquakes, wars, and decay. And sure, that's part of the story. But it doesn't explain why one side collapsed almost completely while the other remained standing. It doesn't explain where millions of tons of travertine limestone disappeared to. And it definitely doesn't explain why, if you look closely at Rome's most beautiful Renaissance buildings, you start seeing familiar stones. The truth is, the Colosseum's destruction wasn't a tragedy. It was methodical, calculated, and it happened over centuries, in broad daylight, with the blessing of popes and princes. But it all started with something the Romans never saw coming. When Emperor Vespasian chose the location for his grand amphitheater in 72 AD, he picked a valley between three of Rome's famous hills. It seemed perfect, flat, accessible, right in the heart of the city. A statement of imperial power that would dominate the skyline and hold 50,000 spectators. But beneath that valley lay a fatal secret. The northern half of the building sits on dense, stable bedrock, solid, ancient, unshakable, the kind of foundation that could hold a monument for millennia. But the southern half, it rests on something far more treacherous: alluvial deposits, loose sediment, ancient river mud that had settled there thousands of years before Rome was even founded. The Roman engineers knew this. They had to. These were the same brilliant minds that built aqueducts spanning valleys and harbors that defied the sea. They compensated with deeper foundations on the south side, driving pilings through the soft earth to find stability below. They reinforced, they calculated. They built with characteristic Roman confidence. For nearly 13 centuries, it worked perfectly. And then the earth moved. September 9th, 1349, late morning. Rome is already reeling from the Black Death that killed a third of the city just the year before. Streets that once teemed with merchants and pilgrims now echo with emptiness. Survivors are trying to rebuild their lives to find some sense of normalcy in a world that's been turned inside out. And then the ground begins to shake. The earthquake lasts less than a minute. But for the Colosseum, sitting on its divided foundation, it's catastrophic. The southern wall, already weakened by centuries of neglect and stripped of its protective marble cladding, dances on its unstable bed of sediment, while the northern wall barely trembles on solid rock. The differential movement tears the structure apart. Arches shear, keystones fall, and the entire southern external wall, 3 stories of perfectly engineered Roman stonework, collapses into a massive pile of rubble. The sound echoes across the 7 hills. Dust rises like a shroud over what was once the greatest entertainment venue the world had ever seen. In one violent moment, the Colosseum transforms from Rome's greatest monument into Rome's greatest opportunity. Here's what most people don't know. By the time that earthquake hit, The Colosseum wasn't a monument anymore. It was a neighborhood, a living, breathing community built inside the bones of imperial glory. Families had been living in the corridors for centuries. There were workshops in the galleries where craftsmen hammered and sawed. Animals grazed in the tunnels where gladiators once prepared for death. And the powerful Frangipani family had built a fortified castle right into the structure itself, turning arches into battlements and corridors into defensive positions. The arena floor, once soaked in blood and glory, was now a public square where children played and merchants sold their wares. The Colosseum had become what Rome always does best. It adapted. It survived. It transformed. So when half the building came down, it didn't destroy a museum. It demolished homes, businesses, lives. And suddenly thousands of dressed stone blocks, perfectly cut and ready to use, were just lying there, free for the taking. Each one weighing tons, already shaped, already finished. The kind of quality stonework that would take months to quarry and dress from scratch. At first it was the locals, people rebuilding their houses, using Colosseum stones for new walls, new churches, new workshops. Small scale, understandable, even sympathetic. These were people who had lost everything, salvaging what they could from the ruins. But then the Renaissance arrived, and with it came ambition on an entirely different scale. In 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued a decree that changed everything. He granted official permission to quarry the Colosseum for St. Peter's Basilica. Think about that for a moment. The head of the Catholic Church, the guardian of Rome's spiritual heritage, gave the green light to dismantle its greatest physical heritage. And just like that, the looting went from theft to civic duty, from crime to calling. Over the next 200 years, the Colosseum became a shopping mall for builders, a home improvement store for the ambitious. Cardinal Riario used it for his palazzo. The Barberini family hauled away cartloads for their palace. Stones from the arena built the Palazzo Venezia, the Palazzo Farnese, bridges, fountains, churches. Each new project stripped away another layer of history. There's a bitter Italian saying that captures this perfectly. What the barbarians didn't do, the Barbarinis did. Because by the time they were finished, more stone had been stolen from the Colosseum during the Renaissance than had ever been destroyed by Visigoths, Vandals, or any invading army in Roman history, and they didn't even hide it. This wasn't done under cover of darkness. Papal accounts show detailed payments for ox carts, workers, and tools. Thousands of tons of travertine, systematically stripped away and carted across the city. The metal clamps that held the stones together? Those were valuable too, melted down for weapons, for bells, for whatever iron was needed. You can still see the holes where people dug them out, like surgical scars pockmarking every remaining surface of the walls. The Colosseum was being cannibalized, and Rome was wearing its bones. The city was quite literally building its future from the fragments of its past. By the early 1700s, there wasn't much left to take. The southern wall was almost entirely gone. The interior had been stripped clean of anything valuable. The marble, the bronze, the decorative elements that once made it gleam in the Mediterranean sun, all vanished into the architectural bloodstream of the eternal city. And slowly Rome started to realize what it had done. In 1749, Pope Benedict XIV did something radical. He declared the Colosseum a sacred site. Why? Because Christians had supposedly been martyred there, killed in the arena for the entertainment of pagan crowds. The historical accuracy of this claim is debatable at best. Most scholars today think Christian martyrdoms, if they happened there at all, were rare. But the designation worked. Suddenly, destroying the Colosseum wasn't just vandalism. It wasn't just short-sighted. It was sacrilege, a sin against memory itself. The quarrying stopped. The looting ended. And for the first time in 500 years, people started thinking about preservation instead of plunder. Today, teams of archaeologists and engineers are still working to stabilize what remains, that geological fault that caused the collapse. They've reinforced it with modern engineering, carefully bracing the surviving structure against any future earthquakes. The missing clamps, replaced with stainless steel that won't corrode or tempt thieves. And slowly, carefully, with patience that would make their Roman predecessors proud, they're ensuring that what's left of the Colosseum will stand for another 2,000 years. But they'll never rebuild the missing half. That's gone forever. Scattered across Rome in 1,000 different buildings, a permanent reminder of the city that consumed its own history. Every time you admire a Renaissance palace or pray in a Baroque church, you might be standing in the presence of stones that once echoed with the roar of crowds and the clash of steel. So the next time you see the Colosseum, don't just see what's missing. See where it went. Look at the Vatican obelisk base, the Palazzo Barberini, the Palazzo Farnese, the bridges over the Tiber. Every one of them is a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the greatest show on earth, frozen in architectural amber. The Colosseum didn't fall to barbarians or time. It fell to something more human, more complicated, and somehow more Roman than anything else. It fell to pragmatism, to ambition, to the eternal human need to build something new from the ruins of what came before. It fell to progress, and the city built itself on its own ruins. Just like Rome has always done, just like Rome always will.